We're going live. Well, hello and good morning and good evening and good everything to everyone in the world out there from Solutions with Aquarius Rising Africa, Australia, and on our channel Healing After SRA with our gorgeous Australians, Rachel and Gabby. How are you two beautifuls?
Good, thank you, darling. Good to be here. Yeah, it's cold.
Yeah. Wow, the cold is setting in. Yeah, crazy.
And I looked up, we've all got jumpers on today. No more singlets.
Yeah.
Times are changing.
Things in the south are cooling down. What can we say? We want we just want our sun back, that's all.
No.
Anyway, wow, I'm loving the topic that we're going to be talking about today. Controversial because, again, not everyone likes to think they have an inner abuser, but most certainly we all do. So our topic up for discussion and today with these two lovelies is overcoming the inner abuser. And my word, you know, anyone who's worked with me for a while or whatever knows completely this is exactly what it is, you know. We all live according to God's frequency, God's law. We all vibrate to a certain frequency, and that frequency consists of our own thoughts, emotions, karmic experiences, consciousness, and that vibrates out of you. And if we are literally in the space of beating up on ourselves, as I think we all tend to do, I think that's one of the archetypes we generally carry anyway, is that of the abuser, because there's no one that is more nasty to ourselves mostly than us ourselves. So very interesting topic. Lovely. Over to you, ladies.
Well, I thought I would begin just kind of recapping what we went over, because we've discussed the victimhood. So that's one of the characters, and by characters we're talking about archetypes or roles, or I guess they're things that you may just, or masks that you might reach for. You know, it might not be very often, but just when you hit that kind of fear of this is a weird situation, what do I do there? So yeah, the victim, the rescuer, and of course we have the abuser. And what we're really seeking to do is become the observer and step outside of all of these. So the fourth choice. Yeah, the abuser. So very reactive role. And I think, you know, obviously it's one that when we feel triggered and go into that fear, it can definitely come up. And it's interesting, you know, relating it to both the rescuer role and character and the victim role. It's quite easy from someone that, you know, maybe spends more time in those archetypes to flip over to an abuser when maybe they're confronted with something. You know, a good example that I can think of is someone that is feeling really hurt and confronted and is probably in victim mode, or, you know, gathering their space around them to deal with their own trauma, and they have someone or feel like or perceive that someone comes at them in an attacking way, and they'll often like just unleash, so completely like bite back. And there's just not that second of, I guess, just contemplating the situation.
Like the wounded animal, you know, I think a great analogy for that is, let's talk about, let's say there's a wounded tiger, in a lot of pain in the corner of the room type thing, feels caged in, and the only point or way to defend itself is really through attack, right? So the victim is very often the one that's feeling the most wounded and the most protective and defensive, and therefore will unleash the harshest self-defense attack ever, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I guess it's that realization that whatever's triggering you has really got to an inner wound in you. Like you were saying, Shanti, it's just, you know, it's hit something that's already open, it was already there. And by being the observer, we want to be able to, you know, rather than be reactive, because we can't control everything that's happening around us or how people are behaving or what their emotions are for the day, but we can always control how we react. And look, that's a challenge for all human. You know, I grew up in a household where, because of addictions and some mental disorders, like narcissistic kind of abuse was very common on an emotional and mental level. And so I kind of grew up with like, I'm never going to be an abuser, like I'm not going to do that. And so I always would stop myself. But when you have someone coming at you hard and it's over a wound, it's incredibly hard to do that. And that's where, you know, I've had to realize that I wasn't actually going into an observer. I was actually internalizing that abuser on myself. And the way it might not be perceived so externally, it's not so, I guess, violent, or, you know, you're not snapping back at someone. But when I felt attacked, I would actually abuse myself. I would control what I ate, for example, be really obsessive about things that I could control in my life, like food, or exercising was another one for me, or being successful and having all my ducks in a row and having all the plates spinning. You know, the more attacked I would just be like, okay, I'm not going to abuse anyone, but I'm just going to make sure that like I'm doing my own thing and it's perfect. Like, you know, it was that kind of inner perfectionist coming out as a way to control a situation that I felt was out of control as well. And I think for survivors, but, you know, for everyone at large, because we've all had trauma in this plane, because of the way that it's set up, you know, internalizing a lot of things that are coming at you doesn't actually allow you to transmute them or explore perhaps like what wound they're hitting. It's kind of just that feeling of like squashing it down. And that definitely showed up for me later in life with fibromyalgia and, you know, huge body pain, fatigue. And that's a really common thing for survivors. Like, I know some of the incredible healers that I've worked with, you know, they would say people that let them know that they're survivors, probably 80 to 90% of them deal with body pains at least, a lot of numbness, which sounds funny because it's kind of like, how can you have body pains and numbness? But it does alternate. And then going to the extremes of things like chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, Lyme's disease. So it's interesting how, you know, by not completely being the observer, like I was the observer enough to not bite back, but I wasn't the observer for myself to sort of look further and say, why is that hurting me so much? Yeah, so
it's such a interesting and important topic, that because you know, as a healer, the body is such a beautiful vessel for spirit. It is the most highly intelligent vehicle you'll ever possess. I always say one cell in your body contains enough information to write 1,000 books of 600 pages each. And we have around 30 or 40 trillion. I don't even know how many cells. So we are highly intelligent, you know, and the body is forever telling us something. So when there's discomfort in the body, you know, pain is not there to crush you or to destroy you. Pain is there to take you to a deeper level of awareness. So it's very hard to embrace pain or discomfort. Absolutely. But if we go in with a mindset to say, let's do this together, you know, you got to make best friends with your body. For starters, you got to start liking yourself. Like anything, you've got to start liking yourself. For anything to get healed, you've got to not approach it from an aggressive or fear-based space. And it's just so beautiful, because when you're saying, I mean, fibromyalgia for sure, and that is something like, which is supposedly has no healing. I've worked with several people with fibromyalgia, and they've healed. And it's really an inner pain so deep. And when you actually start looking and transmuting that inner pain, the body then heals itself. We had another a lady, Jamie Soleil, on Soulful Sunday. She's the ex-gold medalist Olympiad, and she was involved in figure skating, and she was involved in the 2002, that big scandal with Canada and Russia. Very, very interesting story. But she had massive thyroid problems. And, you know, we were speaking about the chakras. She had massive thyroid problems. And the minute she started speaking up, the thyroid problems healed themselves. So it's not you that has to try and fix the problem or the manifestation of the problem. You've just got to bring yourself into alignment, make peace, do the forgiveness, all these beautiful things. And then your body heals itself. It's just something that happens, and it's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can say from personal experience, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia probably about 15 or more years ago, and I don't believe that I have any of those symptoms anymore. Do still have some of the chronic fatigue symptoms, but the fibromyalgia is pretty much under control. And it's interesting what you were saying before too, Gabby, about that perfectionism, because I had the eating disorder, and the self-talk was very negative, and I grew up wanting to always be nice. That was my thing. I remember even saying that to my father at one point. I just want to be nice. And he sniggered. Yeah. And I realized how much I must have, taken away my own power by saying that to him at that time. But I really meant it. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to be this really nice person, which meant that I couldn't do anything wrong and I couldn't bite out at people. But it comes out in different ways. For me, in past relationships, it came out in that way. So I would focus on, whilst I was controlling my eating and exercising excessively and obsessively, walking for 3 hours at a time, that sort of thing, just pretty intense stuff, I would be focusing all my attention on what's wrong with my partner and trying to fix them. And a lot of that was during the time where I was in denial of my own issues. But that negative self-talk, I think, is a massive one for people who've gone through SRA, particularly. It's interesting. I always thought that was just something that everybody had. And again, I'd like to clarify, I don't hear a voice. It's just that inner dialogue that you have. And I managed to switch mine off quite a long time ago, the negative aspect of it. So it's interesting how I managed to turn that off. But someone, an SRA victim, shared with me a passage from Alison Miller's book. I can't remember which one. I should have checked that out before I mentioned it, but I'll put it in the comments perhaps. And this particular passage was so helpful because she was talking about some programmers put in a negative voice that will berate you, and it's there to control you. And it's actually a personality aspect that they put into you as an SRA victim and an MK Ultra victim to constantly keep you under control for when the handler or programmer isn't available. And it was amazing reading that passage. It really helped me. So those, if you can switch off that inner voice. So at one point I decided I was going to be the hero of my own life story. And thank you very much to David, who said that to me when I was quite young. And I switched off that inner voice. It took a long time, took a lot of self-affirmations. Over about 6 months, I said the same as self-affirmations to myself daily. And one of those being, I rescind all contracts I may have made to any entities that are not for my highest good. And that was massive. That made a huge, I think that was part of what actually unlocked a lot of my abuse memories. So many different sort of facets along the way, sort of unlocked this part and that part. Yeah, quite amazing. So, people need to be able to number one, recognize that that inner voice, it's not you. You can switch it off. And quite often, as Alison Miller was saying in her book, that voice will take on the characteristics of a programmer or someone in your life, if you're not an abuse victim, someone in your life, a severe trauma victim, but someone in your life like a family member, perhaps you're constantly told you will never amount to anything, or you're ordinary, or you're this, or you're that. One of my programmers particularly really drummed into me that you're ordinary. And when I would start to remember some things about my childhood, this overwhelming fear of being ordinary would come over me. And it's so funny because now I look at people who have normal, ordinary lives and I envy them. So it's complete, it turns itself completely on its head. But that was something that was programmed in. that you know, to be ordinary was terrible. It was this terrible thing. So bizarre.
Wow, it makes so much sense that they would program negative self-talk in, you know, talking about like from an MK Ultra and ritual abuse perspective, because, you know, if you've got that negative self-talk, like how much are you going to deny yourself, you know, any opportunity for healing? And then they know that represses your memories, the ongoing trauma that you're doing to yourself. Like it's kind of like you're in the whole trauma cycle doing it to yourself now. It's another way of silencing survivors, isn't it? So, you know, well done to you for working through it. And yeah, like, you know, even if you haven't had that kind of deliberate, you know, negative self-talk put into you, like, you know, you only have to look around at our society and see, you know, how acceptable violence and, you know, people yelling at each other and people just being abusive to each other, like even on social media, like the way people talk and not talk, but the way people communicate with each other, like I'm actually shocked a lot of the time, because I'm just like, would you actually say that to someone's face? In reality. So unfortunately on this plane we have been, you know, completely tavistocked in terms of like the level of violence that's acceptable and the level of abuse of each other that's acceptable. And then if you don't abuse them back, chances are you're going to step into abusing yourself over it, or you know, at least reacting in a way that you're not proud of. And look, we're all human, so you know, there's always times that we get triggered and things get the better of us, but you know, we've been brought up in a society where you know, acting out of fear and acting out of anger is so normalized, and it really is the level that most people play at, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think what's so important, Rachel, is what you were saying, is the recognition, you know, that at least even just the possibility exists that you might have been programmed, whether it's a MK program or just through trauma programming. You know, you don't have to go through the MK Ultra stuff. You could have had a very traumatic childhood with parents who were alcoholics and fighting and violence and what have you. That in itself is programming. Let's never forget that. So I think the first thing to recognize for people to step out of this hamster wheel matrix is the possibility. It's just to ask yourself the question, how happy do I feel? And you've got to be dead honest with yourself. You don't have to answer that to anyone. And if you are feeling more unhappy than what you're feeling happy, chances are pretty good that there's something that needs to shift. So firstly, it's the acknowledgement within the self. It's the decision. I can't express enough times and how important the power of decision is. Nothing happens without us making a decision. So that decision that, yes, something in me is not feeling right. It's not me that's not right. Let's never forget that. We tend to think, well, I'm mad or I'm crazy or what. No, something in me does not feel right. And that's what's the important thing, is to recognize that something in me. So it's not me. It's a facet. Okay. And then that moment of acknowledgement, it's almost like, and I think the Christians might call that repentance. We will call it acknowledgement or understanding. That decision shifts everything, because it then allows you to stop, recalibrate, and receive. It's like opening up a lid that's been blocking you off, let's say in your crown chakra. And it's like taking out that lid and suddenly allowing the voice of God to flow through you. And that is a very, very, very different experience, because then suddenly, even though you might be going through this horrible, painful experience, there's an element of peace that comes in. And that element of peace supports you through your healing. The right people arrive at the right time. Suddenly the right books arrive for you, or the right workshops or courses, or the right healer comes in your way. That's how God works with us. But we have to acknowledge that we ourselves want the change. We recognize change as necessary, and we have to want that change. And from that place, healing begins, no matter what. No matter what. And I'm not saying it's going to be an easy path. It's a lot easier than you think if you have a good healer. I'll tell you that much. The fear of not wanting to face a traumatic past are the things that are painful. Yeah. That's the stuff, that's the nightmares, the monsters in the closet, the type of things that we don't want to look at, and they just become bigger and bigger in our minds. And yet when we actually turn around and say, okay, what is it that's chasing me? You will see that it's not nearly as scary as what you thought. And you'll see the minute you do that, and what you were saying, Rachel, as well, is that, you know, before you were aware of this, you were blaming all your partners. You know, that inner abuser in you was permeating out of you, and therefore attracting partners who matched that.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So instead of looking at ourselves, it's very easy to blame someone else for being a narcissist or being a perpetrator of violence. But until you realize something in me is attracting that.
And
that's
and
where
you can actually bring that out in somebody when they don't even necessarily really have that in them. Yeah. Because, you know, a lot of people who suffer from trauma expect to be treated badly. And so they'll choose someone that inherently might have that in them, or might be attracted to them for whatever reason. And then they might berate them, you know. I mean, I'm not saying it's ever okay for anybody to hit anybody, but you do hear of situations where one person is constantly initiating a negative interaction with the other person. And they, you know, you can only push people so far. Yeah.
You know, and sometimes I think people, that's their journey. They're in that dark, horrible place because their journey is to be there right now. But as a healer, and all of us sitting here are healers, for me, if someone is willing and showing the slightest crack in their armor, that they're willing to receive the light, I'll be there. And it takes kindness, you know, it takes those of us who are maybe awakened to this sort of stuff, kindness, compassion. Stop telling the person they're a useless thief. Let's understand what turned them into a useless thief to begin with.
Yeah.
It's not your responsibility to take on their life's dramas, but you can exercise compassion and say, dude, you don't have to steal my money. Here's $100 for you. Tell you what, why don't you just take it? I'll give it to you instead. You know what I'm saying? It changes his world completely, and it changes you.
Yeah.
So true. It's like
we all have these.
Yeah. Someone has to be the light in the situation and show the way. You know, and we can get so caught up in like what's right and what's wrong. And particularly if you've fallen into the programs of one of these roles, like the abuser, the victim, or the rescuer, you're going to be completely weighing up like what's wrong and right. And I think, you know, what you've both been saying is that the crucial thing is that we take self-responsibility. And the biggest part of that is to stop externalizing it. You know, and as soon as we externalize, you can tell you've externalized it, because the conversations that you'll be having with yourself or with the person who you feel is attacking you will be about who's right and who's wrong. And healing for yourself and healing for the world can never come from that place. And it is a challenge, you know what I mean? Like the universe will put challenges in your way that will test you to not go into that right or wrong all the time. And that's how we grow. That is absolutely how we challenge ourselves and grow. Yeah, it's incredible how when we come to the same situation, just with a higher vibration of, you know, accepting that the situation's there to teach us something. And even if you can have gratitude just for the pain that is causing you at this time. I know that just sounds like, am I sadistic? But I found that helps me so much, because as soon as I can have gratitude for what I'm feeling in my body, feeling in my mind, feeling in my emotions, all of a sudden, all the answers that I could possibly need about that situation just come through. And it's like that connection to your higher self, or to source, or to God, like however you want to think about it. You can't get all that information until you drop the programming as well, the right, wrong, the victim, the abuser, the rescuer. You know, once those things can come down, and you can be quite vulnerable, and it is hard, you know, when you're being really triggered and you're just like, you know, for me, I'll want to shut down if I'm really triggered, because that's my way of not ever becoming the abuser. And that's not right either, because that's abusing myself, and it's also not giving whoever I'm interacting with, as well as myself, the opportunity to grow and heal. So, you know, I've had to learn to drop rules around interactions, and, you know, drop the right and wrong, and just move with a flow of like, you know, what in this moment feels best, you know, what feels like the lighter way of going forward. Like, how can I show gratitude for this moment, even though it's killing me? How can I show gratitude for this person who's attacking me? Like, because of, you know, what deeper level will I know myself on? So I find that really
so important. So important. And I've learnt that from you, Gabby, you know, that gratitude factor. You know, it just, now when I'm, you know, in that fear response, because there's so much going on in the world to be afraid of at the moment, I will sort of turn it around. Well, what am I actually grateful for in this moment? And it changes it completely. It's just an immediate change. It takes it away completely. It's amazing. It's actually incredibly beneficial. So thank you.
No, bless. I still am working through my fibro, and like, as soon as I have pain in my body, you know, like before I'd be like, go do yoga or go drink tea or have your supplements. And now I just sit with it in gratitude, and like, it just dissolves. Like, it may be back in 10 minutes or 2 hours or the next day, but you know, it just shows how much we create the physical through, you know, our emotions first, then what we're thinking.
Absolutely.
It's so powerful if we can just change our vibration through, you know, challenging ourselves to, rather than be reactive and be like, I'm stuck in this emotion. Like, why don't you choose where you would like to be, and look at the situation that you feel so stuck in from another perspective?
Yeah,
it's interesting what you were saying before, Chantelle, about making a decision. So when around 2012, I was on pain relief medication. It's the only way I could cope. And it was quite strong. And I made a decision, and I threw it all away and went cold turkey. And I made a decision that I was going to get better, and I wasn't going to be in pain anymore. And it didn't happen immediately, but it took some time, but it did work. And, you know, like this time of year is usually a nightmare for people with fibromyalgia. Any kind of rheumatic condition, the cold weather is a nightmare. But I just realized, before, when you were talking about it, about healing from it, and Chantelle, you mentioned that you knew people had healed from it. I haven't had pain from it for quite some time. And normally I would be dreading winter for the pain, but I actually love winter. I like being cold. I like blankets. I've got a blanket on right now.
That's so hopeful for everyone that's, you know, suffering from pain in their bodies, to know that it is completely and absolutely, you know, open to be healed. It's just a way.
And that's not to say that everybody can just switch it off like that either. That's not an expectation. But
taking years.
I was so determined. I was so sick of it. I'd been ill for so long at that point. It was like, no, I'm making a decision.
I think it's really important, because it's, as I said, it's like what you were saying now, Rachel, as well. It's that decision, you know, it's that decision. And, you know, it's about also understanding, you know, when we get to connecting with spirit and source, and we start having these frequent communications with our higher self, and we start realizing we are simply co-creators with God, or the source, or the divine creator, you know, we understand that we've had a sacred contract with the source to be exactly where we are. You know, there are so many people, and I don't think they realize how brave they are and how strong they are. And it's very often these situations that they have found themselves in have shown them their own strength. have shown them their own courage, have shown them how much compassion they've had, have shown them all of these amazing things. And that's what makes people who've experienced such intense trauma such powerful healers. You know, and when someone has understood that, and I'm not saying you've got to be happy and dancing on the clouds about it, absolutely not, but it's part of our earthly experience. We all go through some kind of hell here on earth, you know, in many lifetimes that we live here. And it's really about understanding and being compassionate with people who are going through their hell, and learning and understanding that those of us who are fortunate enough not to be there can be a helping hand for those who have. So whether it's offering a kind word or a ride to work or money if you can, or whatever, you know, believing, the first thing, I mean, we speak about this a lot, is to believe these people when they start speaking up. That whole thyroid thing that heals is when people start speaking up. But before they speak up, they need to find the courage within to speak up. And that takes a lot, because there's so much fear. It's like what you were saying earlier on, Rachel, with all this programming, you know, what is mine? What isn't mine? Who am I? Who aren't I? And really the only thing that we can do through that is to pray, to meditate, to align. You will soon know what to do, where to go. God is always around. Our source is omnipotent, around you, adores you, supports you, loves you. It's you that is separated. When you're not feeling that, when you're not understanding that, it's because you yourself have moved out of that alignment. We all do. Nothing wrong with that. Okay, it's part of being a human being. But it's just important to know that there are tools to get you back, no matter what your experience is. You just got to sit, breathe, just breathe, just breathe, just breathe, just breathe, just breathe, just breathe. As long as you're breathing, and you know, the more deeply you breathe, and the more you just, because your breath and your mind are synced to each other. So when your breath is shallow, which most of us are because we've not been taught to breathe properly, especially here in the West, your mind is crazy. So when you start slowing down your breath and just breathing, and just imagine just breathing into every cell of your body, your mind starts calming down. And suddenly solutions pop in, or an inspiration pops in. And that's what starts the ball rolling. These are the things that people think are so airy-fairy. My word. These are the things that are your power. These are your superpowers. Honestly, we're linked to this. You are a superpower, because it is that way. And I can't explain it unless you go there.
Oh, the breath is so important. It's interesting. I used I don't know if it's a self-hypnosis technique, but I used a technique as a small child because I couldn't sleep at night, and I'd have all these fears that I was going to die in my sleep. So I used to do a breathing technique. I didn't learn it from anywhere. I don't know where I got it from, but I would imagine there was a light in my body, like a green light, which is really interesting because, you know, I now look back, and in the aura, when someone has cancer, it will show up as a lurid green. So, but I would imagine that there was this fluorescent green light in my body, and I would breathe deeply. And as I breathed out, I would imagine all of that horrible green light going out through my toes. And I would do it for every part of my body, arms. And by the time I got to my shoulders and my arms, I'd be asleep. It worked brilliantly. And I was doing that from, at least about 8 on. But that breath technique, I didn't understand any of that until a friend lent me a book called Hands of Light. Oh, it must have been about 10 years ago.
Barbara, what's her name? Who wrote that
I've
book?
lent it to a client and never got it back. It was one of the most brilliant books. I can't even remember the author, but it was fantastic. And she did this section on breathing. And oh my gosh, if you can concentrate, it's not even hard. Concentrate on your breath. It's euphoric. Nobody needs to take drugs. No need for alcohol or any of these other things. If you want to have an addiction problem, learn to breathe properly. And that can be your addiction, you know, because it's so good for you and it's so relaxing. So, yeah.
Well, if you think about smoking, what are they doing?
Exactly.
Breathing.
Exactly. Yes. There you go. Yeah. I never thought about it that way. Yeah. You don't need the nicotine. It's interesting what they're saying about nicotine too. They've been cutting out the nicotine from all these Western countries, and then they brought in these nasty pathogens, and apparently it turns it off to a degree. I've just been reading about that recently. Nicotinamide has an effect on that.
Yeah, well, the shamans use nicotine. Like, I'm thinking of like the South American shamans. They always hang a little bundle of nicotine because it's a sacred plant. So when they're doing clearings or not a smoke ceremony, it's like when you go into a hut and they just put like all this steam through, and it basically takes everything that's negative, any attachments out. But they'll hang that, so like each person will hang one so your spirit knows where to go back to, etc. So it's a really sacred plant, and it actually protects a lot from entities, and you don't need to smoke it. You can just have it you know, with crystals or something like that. So it's so interesting how we've been taught, you know, so differently as well. But yeah, I love
brilliant for mouth ulcers. If you get a little bit of rolling tobacco and put it on a mouth ulcer, it'll be gone within a couple of days. Takes the pain, and it's wonderful. Yeah.
So funny,
wow.
isn't it? But yeah,
very interesting. And don't they also have these tobacco ceremonies or something?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of like if you're doing ayahuasca or something like that, isn't that before they do it? I'm not sure.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just remembering. It's called a sweat lodge. I just couldn't bring it up in my mind before if anyone's trying to think of the shamanic practice. But yeah, that's exactly what you're talking about, Shanti, is the tobacco being used in the sweat lodge.
Because it cleanses the body. It's a very, it's thing. Isn't it interesting how when you smoke in, it's like supposedly a very negative thing. But if you think of it, I mean, obviously, I think any smoking in the way that the average person smokes, whether it's 20 or 40 cigarettes a day, that is never, ever good. But if you're thinking about how the ancients do it, you know, they will do it when the elders are meeting, you know, and they're having their communal meetings, and the elders sit there smoking their peace pipes and stuff like that. I think that for me is a different type of smoking that I resonate with.
It's doing something consciously, isn't it? You know, like when we abuse something unconsciously to run away from something, you know, it's going to have a negative effect on us. But when we choose,
too much of a good thing is bad, right?
Yeah. What do the Native Americans say? Anything in excess is a poison. Absolutely. So I think that's a really good way to feel into the balance of life.
Wow. Even water, you can drown. You have too much water, you can drown your tissues, and you can, you know.
Yeah, look, you don't have enough salt. I've heard that too. Yeah.
And if you drink 5 liters of water a day, you're going to flush out all the nutrients in your body. You know, so you want to have your 2 to 3 liters a day, which maintains a healthy flow of the body. You know, you don't want to overdo it. So everything, you know, life is about being balanced, you know, and it's about balancing out, sharing, delegating, taking time out, you know, going with the seasons. You know, it's winter now, it's time to hibernate, and it's actually quite nice to hibernate as well. It's like, what do you find in these cold moments? What do you find in these moments of isolation? I just like, you know, I must say, I really thoroughly enjoy being single. Not because I'm now, and it's very different from protecting myself because all men are bad and I'm now hermetizing. Not at all. I know some amazing, very beautiful men out there. I've just chosen at this time to really just find what it feels like, to ride the rim. Because, if you look at a coin, there's not two sides of the coin, there's three sides. And I mean, my friend Olav Zipser, who's the world champion skydiving, or in past, he taught me this. He says, you look at the one side of the coin, the other side of the coin might be good, might be bad, but the third side is the rim. So when you can ride the rim, in other words, understand that both sides are equally as important in understanding. And then you find that balance between the two. And then you're able to experience life in a very balanced way. But you're not going to be able to balance that. You're feeling right heavy or left heavy, right?
Yeah, you have to experience both right and left to find the middle too. And I think, we can beat ourselves up about, I've been a victim or I've been an abuser, but, it's human nature that, you have to kind of go to these places to realize it's not what you want. And we actually often, need to create enough of a mess around us, or just enough suffering, and we create our own suffering in trauma cycles to actually, and that's part of the healing. You have to feel it so much that you're just I'm sick of it. I'm absolutely sick of this program. I'm sick of doing this. And then from that, you crack open and say, I want more, and what's out there? What's more than this? Because this sucks. This really sucks. I don't want to do it anymore. So you have to really get to that point too. So I love that about the rim.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for being single if you're not attracting the wrong people, or attracting people that you can blame for your own problems.
I feel like it's an expression of, having a love affair with yourself as well. And, I was really lucky to have some time on my own, this. It was 6 months at a really important stage of my life before my current relationship. And if I didn't have those 6 months to really just fall in love with myself, honor myself, just do things for me. I was in a really narcissistic relationship before, and that was so important. I think it's so beautiful that people can enjoy being themselves and being with themselves, really being there, instead of being in that position and wanting something else. There's something that we can take from every experience.
Absolutely. It really is, I mean, you talk about that whole relationship with falling in love with yourself. I mean, from the workshops that I do, that's one of the first things. You've got to take yourself out on a date. You've got to
spend time with yourself.
So, and you've got to, part of the experience is to look at yourself naked in the mirror. And a lot of people find that incredibly, incredibly difficult to do. But, it's just amazing. You talk about that, having that love affair with yourself. It's so true, just cooking for myself, buying food from, I was a young mother. Again, I was a single mother as well. So, especially when your whole life is about putting other humans for yourself, and from a young age, and not having support from his dad. So it was me doing it, and I loved it. Make no mistake. I loved the challenge. I loved the experience of being a mom and a single mom, and being able to send him overseas to study and stuff like that. But there's always that someone else needs something more than you.
Yeah.
And to get back to that place of, and I think any mother knows that, I think, and I'm not saying fathers don't, but I can really just speak from my perspective, but then to come back and really listen and go back to childhood traumas, even things that I didn't even think were there anymore. And suddenly it flares up, and have the space to do it, and not have someone asking me what's wrong, or I just like to do things in my own space, my own time. I'll get there. So that's been it's been a very amazing process to find that wholeness. And it really is, you know, and I look back on my life, and I mean, I lost my partner in a hijacking at the end of 1996. It was very traumatic, but had it not been for that experience, I would not be doing the work I'm doing today. I remember when I went to identify his body at the mortuary, it was very traumatic because he'd been shot execution style. But I just remember as I was like freaking out, his voice came to me so strong and so clear and so calm. And he said to me, just remember, it's only my body. I'm right here.
Oh, wow.
And that immediately calmed me. And then I was able to use my partner's murder as a catalyst for healing. And I met the murderer. I went to meet him 8 months later. I actually took a 4 or 5 hour drive to meet him. And I sat in front of him speaking to him. I had no idea how I was going to react, but it was such a healing experience because I needed to see him. I needed to speak to him. I needed to understand as much as what I could, and I needed to let it go. And I did. The next morning, I had a dream of the guy that shot him and myself in a past life.
Oh,
and then I knew the karma was complete.
Yeah.
And from then, it was using this experience as a tool for healing. And had I not gone through that, I wouldn't have written my programs the way that I have. It, you know, a death and especially a murder, it's a very, very, it goes deep. You are forced to look very, very deep. And especially with a partner or a child or something like that, you know, someone like that you have a strong, intense connection with. Because, and I think for me, it was an amazing experience because that has opened up so many other roads again. So we have the ability to turn a trauma into something very healthful and healthy, you know. We just make a decision to do that. And I think all of us that are healers and that are good healers know that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we go through things to grow us.
Thanks for sharing that, darling. Wow.
Thank you for listening.
Do you still hear him? Does he still talk with you?
Yeah, well, it's like, it's such a different experience now. In the beginning, very much like that for about the first 5 years. It was almost, I could smell him. I could, I dreamt about him a lot. I could sense him around, and especially with my work that I was doing, because it wasn't after that, long after that, I suddenly would wake up in the middle of the night and just get these massive downloads. And I knew it was him. And I mean, you know, through that, through just writing, I mean, I just write. I understood about cellular healing. At that stage, there was no talk about cellular healing. This was still very much, this was even before the days of Brandon Bayes, when she wrote her book, The Journey. This was before that. When her book came out, I was already doing all that work. This little South African girl from the outback of Africa. But it was amazing because I had nothing. I had no leverage or I had no one to refer back to because no one I knew was doing it. So I had my clients and my students, and I said, listen, boom. And I had amazing students at the time. They were like, oh yeah, we're right here with you. And I'd say, okay, we've got to test this. We've got to test this. I want to work with you on that. I want to see that. And on myself. And I got them to work on me. And it was amazing how using and understanding and focusing and having a certain understanding changes everything. And that was the first thing I realized, that when we understand how things work, that changes things. We just have to get, and it's not the full understanding, but the understanding that I'm responsible for my own destiny. And I need to stop blaming others in order for me to get happy. That understanding stops you in your tracks. And unlocks something in you that, just as I was saying earlier, gives you that sense of inner peace. And you don't know what the solution is, but you know it's there. And you're quite okay to know that the solution's there. It's there, it's there, it's there, it's there. And boom, next thing, there it is. And then you don't just feel it, but you see it and experience it at the same time. So it's an
power back.
Totally.
Yeah.
Honestly, hating and having non-forgiveness of others. Wow, guys, I can't tell you, you know, I forgave my fiance's murderer. It wasn't about him. And I needed to go and see him. I needed to go and sit with him. I needed to go and look him in the eye. Everyone told me not to do it. I'm like, are you mad? Don't tell me not to do something I know I need to do. And I went, I got in my car and I drove. And I sat with them. I was nervous like hell.
I bet.
And I left there feeling so sad for him. Because I can tell you, before that, when I was working with the cops in Joburg, they gave me all the information on him, basically telling me that if I wanted to have a vigilante take care of him, and it was not him because he had a partner and a child, a daughter, 3-year-old daughter at the time, and a sister as well. So basically telling me if I wanted to take care of him, I could.
Wow.
But there was no ways I would ever do that. Ever.
Wow.
But I
That
needed
would have
to...
just perpetuated the karma and made it even uglier, and wow, could have done that great damage to your soul. Oh, gosh.
Totally. God gives you opportunities. God gives you crossroads.
Yeah.
We are given crossroads. And what is your intention at that crossroad? Always ask yourself, what is your intention? Your intention is everything. And in fact, I think intention is even before the decision. I want to be a healer. Okay. Now, what do I need to do to be a healer? Well, I've got to stop drinking 2 bottles of brandy a day. I've got to stop smoking 60 cigarettes a day. I've got to stop having bad relationships with everyone in my life. In me, I know I'm a healer, but I've got this. I get that. I want those people as healers. Those are the healers. Rest assured, those are the healers.
Yeah.
But you got to stop dead in your tracks and decide, okay, I'm letting the bullshit go.
Yeah.
And when you make that decision to let the bullshit go, bam, everything changes. And God gives you a balm. That in itself is the healing balm. I can't explain. It's like it just flows into you, through you. Every cell in your body is just oozing with God's healing. You don't have a bad thought about anyone. Suddenly, everyone in your life, you're able to understand and make sense of why I chose this experience. Because on a much higher level, I chose it. And I know that's very hard for some people, and I get a lot of flack from that. But hey, got broad shoulders. You know, there's a lot of flack I've taken in my life. This is just next level stuff, but it's all good. Immune.
That's one of my cries. Everything happens for a reason, and we choose it to learn.
Yeah.
And people hate hearing that.
Yeah. But so yet when we into that, sorry, Gabby, I was just saying, when we get into that knowing, when we make the decision to see the gift in the experience, wow, your life changes exponentially. Yeah. You don't even want to deal with that nonsense anymore. You don't even want to hear those thoughts in your head anymore. You're now choosing another way, and it's just eye-opening. It's bedazzling. You bedazzled.
You can rise above it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's so easy to get caught up engaging with behavior that we don't want to exhibit anyway. You know, and it's so easy if we can like just choose another way of looking at things, a higher frequency, to find it a better way forward. Yeah.
So yeah, lovely conversation, girls, as always. Love having you on the show. Really look forward to these bi-weekly moments. So our time is up, sadly. But is there anything that any of you would like to just end off, have something to say just to end off?
Well, turn off that inner self-talk that's negative, choose a different way. And every time it comes up, just say, no, I'm not thinking like that anymore. And distract yourself to something more positive, gratitude. And it'd be amazed how quickly it stops. You can switch it off.
It's possible. Yeah, I see these times, you know, as we are going through so much deprogramming, like both individually and collectively. And, you know, the investment that everyone is putting into themselves is just going to create this new world that we're all dreaming of, just exponentially. And, you know, the time that you spend working on yourself is going to be the biggest gift that you could ever possibly be in the new earth that is literally forming, you know, as the other one crumbles. So it's really a time of like us individually rewriting our own story, like starting a new chapter. I love like what you say, Rachel, about becoming your own hero, and that's been something that's, you know, really helped me through some really dark times in my past as well. And, you know, if we can each individually, you know, take that complete responsibility for everything, you know, in our lives around us, you know, if we all do that, how quickly is the world going to change, and how many people are going to see what you're doing and be inspired to start, you know, their own journey inward that eventually just cracks them open into who they're meant to be as well. So, you know, it's a beautiful time of, under this extreme challenge that we're all going through, you know, we are cracking ourselves open, you know, we're becoming the butterflies that we wouldn't have grown into without sort of all this pressure as well. So definitely keep hope and, you know, spend that time on you, and know that that is the best place that you can place your energy at this time, because it will take you exactly where you need to be.
Exactly. Wow. Thank you so much, ladies. It's always a pleasure to have you, and look forward to seeing you again. Thank you to all our beautiful viewers. I love you guys. And what you guys don't know, I just discovered last night, I can now see the live chat in front of me. I mean, like, wow.
Technology.
I'm such a technophobe. I couldn't get the Zoom and the live chat on at the same time. No, I just figured out how. So it's really good to see you. God, it's always wonderful to see you. Scott, hi. Yeah, you guys know Scott. He's always around. The Aussie. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Love having you on. Thank you for the support. If you haven't already, please give us a like, a share, and a subscribe. Follow us on Aquarius Rising Africa 2 as well. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're moving on to Rumble now, so find us on Rumble as well, please. And because that's going to definitely, we're making that our main channel over time, but because of all our strikes we have here, I don't think YouTube finds us very amusing anymore.
They can't keep up.
Rumble's left.
So we just like do it and just do it. It's fine. We'll just all over. Okay, guys. God bless you all. Take good care of yourselves, and we'll see you very, very soon.